Welcome to the Simpleton Podcast, the podcast with the most distinguished listeners on this earth and in heaven. Welcome, Laura Hehman.
Thank you, Clark Massey.
We have two new sponsorships to introduce our audience to today. Daniel Mitsui and Molasses. As our listeners know, people do not sponsor our podcast. Our podcast sponsors people. And today we're sponsoring Molasses and a new Catholic artist named Daniel Mitsui. All right. So I thought Molasses. Can we start with Molasses?
Let's start with Molasses.
I've always thought it's interesting that the college bowl games were sponsored by like sugar.
Yes.
Oranges.
Mm-hmm.
Roses.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and now we have like the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl, right?
Yeah.
But we don't like say like corn.
Chip.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tortillas sponsored this college football game. You know, I always thought that was interesting. You know, it seems like it must have been a simpler age when sugar would sponsor something. Brought to you by sugar.
I mean, it was like, even though there were individual brands within the sugar industry, there was like
some type of producer association must have done it, right?
Yeah.
Now, I think that Molasses has been underappreciated tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
And as an older man, I'm getting into certain things like molasses and black licorice are very important right now. And I've got this one daughter who I'm like getting onto the molasses train.
Okay.
You know, it's really good like on Chex. Like if you're eating a bowl of cereal, Chex, you just drizzle molasses on top, you know?
Yeah.
But if there was a way to eat more molasses without as much sugar, because I'm not after
you're
the
interested.
sweet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same with licorice.
Okay.
I've had to eat a lot of Good and Plenty, which I'm not even that happy with, but it's like, how else do you get that really hardcore black licorice flavor? All right, we're looking for recommendations on that. And
well, I feel like the people of South Louisiana will have a lot to say, so.
On molasses?
Yeah.
Well, we have listeners in South Louisiana.
Yes, so.
I know that for a fact.
Help us out.
As you're going to help us out, I want to introduce the new call-in line. The call-in line is 913-390-3672. Please leave us a message. Tell us anything you want. We might play it on the podcast. 913-390-3672. That's our new call-in line for the Simpleton Podcast. All right, let's go to Daniel Mitsui. So you knew of this guy before I discovered him, right?
Yep.
What was like the buzz that you had on him?
Well, Mary Smith, one of our favorite podcast guests, knew a lot about him and had kind of been talking him up. And he made these like beautiful traditional imagery very much his own. Like it wasn't like copying, you know.
I think he says that he's very inspired by illuminated manuscripts. Mm-hmm. And you see a lot of that if you go to his website, Daniel Mitsui, and he'll sell you prints of everything on there. What got me there, that would not have been enough to get me interested.
Yeah.
You know, like it's decent. It's good stuff.
I mean,
you know?
yeah, she would say more about it. I think another thing is like all of his prints are incredibly detailed. Like you can just keep looking at it and find more meaning and symbolism that's interesting. Yeah.
What got me there, though, was he is Japanese American, although he's kind of a generation or so removed from Japan. But he started doing some stuff in kind of a 19th century Japanese style. Mm-hmm. And it's where the Japanese would draw these guys kind of like crazy looking, fierce, you know, like samurais, right? And he has a great one of like Saint Michael the Archangel attacking Satan. And it's like a Japanese samurai looking Saint Michael the Archangel, and it's pretty cool. The one that I'm most interested in, though, personally, is I really like Saint Anthony the Great or Saint Anthony of the Desert. And he's got a Saint Anthony of the Desert done in a Japanese style where all the demons are like kind of clawing at Saint Anthony as he's like very confidently walking. And he's also got that crazy eye look, you know? I think Saint Jerome would be a great topic for him. St. Jerome kind of had this like reputation for kind of having a bad attitude, right? Like I heard this from a priest. I have no source besides 1,000-year-old gossip. that the reason why Augustine did not translate the Bible into the Vulgate was because he didn't want to offend Jerome. So Jerome was a little bit notorious like this. And I think Jerome with the skull in the background, being all crazy looking Japanese style, I think that would be a great devotional.
All right.
I'm kind of making him sound like he's like cutting edge new, but actually it's very traditional looking stuff. So, all right. What else you got, Laura?
Well, my grandmother passed away this past Saturday. And she was a very interesting woman. She was 100 years old. So this was my paternal grandmother, and she lived in Puerto Rico, which is where my family is from. And she was a teacher for many years, but she studied biochem in college in the States, which was very unusual for her time. And she was going to be a doctor, was accepted into med school, but then married my grandfather instead. And there's some interesting details that came to mind that I wanted to share. When she was very active in her church, and she would go door to door in like the project housing in Puerto Rico to meet who lived there, to invite them to church, to like kind of take notes about them and how the church could help them, etc. And this was kind of like a work of the church to do this in the project neighborhoods that was in the parish, you know. And that is sort of what we do at our ministry. And that's pretty interesting. But I think that this was just kind of like a standard function of the church, you know, or I don't know if it was standard. They did that at their church every year. You know, they would do these, like, they would call it like the parish census or whatever. Another thing is she was childhood friends with a blessed, and the blessed died young, I think in his early 40s, but she kept up her friendship with his sister for many years and would take her to daily mass because his sister did not drive. And he made it his life mission to like help people understand what was going on during the liturgy, because a lot of people didn't know. So he translated all these like the liturgy and a lot of church documents and stuff into Spanish for people so that they could learn like what was happening during mass.
So if your grandma is 100 years old, mm-hmm. then she was born in the 20s.
23. Yeah.
Right?
I'm sorry, 24, 1924. Mm-hmm.
And then if this guy died when he was 40 and he was a contemporary, then he died in the middle of Vatican II or at the beginning of Vatican II, somewhere around there, right?
Yeah.
And so he was dealing with people who did not understand the Latin Mass and trying to make it understandable.
Yeah, he was trying to help people understand what was happening during Mass, and he was trying to help people understand like the meaning of the liturgical seasons. And his like kind of the famous thing he would say is like, we live for that night, meaning like Easter. And because I think people somehow were disconnected from the meaning of that, you know, that was kind of like the pinnacle of
what was his name, and also like what was his job? Was he like full time doing something else and doing this on the side, or what?
He was his name was Carlos Rodriguez, but everyone calls him Blessed Charlie. In Puerto Rico, and his friends called him Charlie. He had a lot of health issues, and never, like, he wanted to be a priest, but his, like, he had, like, colitis or something, and that prevented him from doing that. And then he, later on in his life, tried to go to college, but also had to leave that. I think all of his energy was basically dedicated to the church. I don't think he had a day job, and he died from these like health issues that he had. But so he like organized all these like I forget what they were called, like liturgy groups or something, like, but these kind of study groups, and so that was like his main ministry, and my grandmother participated in that, and yeah, he was from like my parents' hometown. So yeah.
My understanding is back in the day, meaning like kind of pre-Vatican II time frame, that if there was anything wrong with you, you were not allowed to become a priest. Like I met a very old priest who was denied being a priest for many years and was a brother because of epilepsy.
Yeah.
And I know.
Well, I had an uncle. This is not the priesthood, but I had an uncle that was epileptic, and he had an engineering degree. I'm sorry, not an uncle. My dad's uncle. So my grandfather's brother had an engineering degree from Catholic U. Like, he was able to complete the degree, but couldn't get a job because of his epilepsy. Like, no one would give him a job.
Well, that sounds a broader thing. What I had heard in like priestly circles was that like they wanted you to image Christ, and therefore even if you were missing like a little piece of your pinky finger or whatever, you were considered not to fully image it, right? And then later we changed that. It also sounds like a situation where they almost had too many applicants, which probably was also true back then. But yeah. So that's just interesting.
Yeah. So my grandmother, she had like a very robust prayer life. And I think she lived in her house until she was like 92 or so, and then was like, okay, I'm done and I'm ready to move into like a facility of some sort. But basically until then, she went to daily mass. And I think she did this, she like pray a rosary, read the daily scripture, spend like quiet time in prayer with God, like pretty much every day. When she decided that she wanted to move into like a care facility, she wanted to move into this, like a home that was run by nuns, but it was like kind of for poor people, which my grandmother was not, because they had daily mass there and like the nuns' prayer schedule. But my dad and uncle did not feel comfortable with the facility, and they did not think it was like a nice enough place to move their mother. And I think like as far as the care and like they did not have the same resources as the facility that she did move into. Like she was like very well cared for, and they did a lot of like activities and outings and stuff. And my grandmother really liked to go out and about, etc. So she moved into this like very nice facility, which they did not have daily mass. And I every so often I think about that. I feel grateful for that, for the place that she did move to, but I also, it's like you go and it's like there's like telenovelas or like American Idol on TV, all day, every day. And I don't know, I think it's just interesting to think about, your last decade.
There's kind of the chance to like be a monk in your last decade.
But there might be a little bit of suffering that wouldn't happen in the other place, But
you also could just go mad if you like had telenovelas and American Idol all day, every day.
I know. Yeah. So, my grandmother was an amazing woman. She was beloved by everybody. I think everyone in my family, wants to emulate her. And I think that people that knew her really feel like God put a really special and unusual person, so she's definitely unique today. I think the fruits of like a faithful life were very apparent in her. And yeah,
there's no good transition to the next topic. Laura and I have been struggling with a new church scandal that broke. It's not really of the church; it's of one of these like lay religious groups.
It's not that new though. That it didn't break recently. It broke a while ago. Sorry, we just learned of it. And
there was a new phase of
new
it.
Buzz about it.
Yeah, there was a new action by the Vatican to expel people.
That would, yeah.
And it has really raised a much bigger question. And to me, the answer to this question is just so obvious. And part of the reason why this is worth discussing is, why isn't it obvious to everyone else? That's the weird part about this. So let me say this. So essentially, we've got 3 orders that all happen to be from Latin America that all have the same problem. The problem is they had a founder who, how do you even say it? It needs to be said as bad as it is, okay? They each had founders that sodomized their spiritual directees, okay? And I'm only allowed to say that word once.
I hate it.
But you need to just like take it head on. It's as bad as it gets. I mean, what are you doing? Like, what is this, right? So like they're sexual predators.
He was abusing and taking advantage of
I like the word
people.
sexual predator.
They were predators. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they were wolves in sheep's clothing, right? Mm-hmm. All of these three orders still exist. One of them's not an order. One's a lay movement. So in the case of the Legionnaires, we have their founder. This happened to. He had full-blown second life besides being a predator, had kids and everything outside. He gets removed, right? Mm-hmm. Legionnaires still exist. Then there's the
Servants of the Lord.
The Incarnate Word.
Institute of the Incarnate Word. Yeah.
They seem to have multiple names.
Yeah.
Same thing with their founder, right?
Yeah, and he's still like on their website, like, meet our founder, which
Right.
I'm like, what is that? You know, you're not even going to pretend that this is bad. I don't know what that is.
Right. And then the third group is this group out of Peru. How do you say their name?
It's the Sodality of Christian Life, I think. It's SCV. I think their name is in Latin, but SCV or Sodalatium of the Christian Life.
Same deal with this, right? And they are a lay movement, though. And so their founder was a layman. Same issue, right? And that was the one that just came to our attention because 10 people were expelled from that order, including some people who worked in the Denver Archdiocese, including a guy who's like spiritual director. They're the ones, that's the group that did formation for Christ in the City. I hope they don't do formation for them anymore, but that's part of why we're talking. It's like, why aren't these things eradicated and reorganized, right?
Yeah.
So before we get into that, let me say like three like priors. So this is where I'm coming from. And I think all of us should just accept these three ideas as just kind of like facts. But here we go. The first one is more religious orders do not exist now than do exist. Meaning like more religious orders have ended than exist today, right? And that fact will continue to be true throughout the life of the church, right? And a lot of the new orders that you see, you know, that you might have hopes on that are forming today just won't be here a few hundred years from now. May not be here 50 years from now, right? That's a fact. The other thing is there are a tremendous number of biblical verses about false prophets, about fake apostles, about wolves in sheep's clothing. Just to remind everyone a few of these verses, which we do read in the Mass, Peter says, "But false prophets also arose among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you, who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the master who brought them, bringing upon themselves swift destruction." Matthew said, "Beware of false prophets who come into you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit." Or Corinthians from Paul, "For such men are false apostles, deceitful men, disguising themselves as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for even Satan disguised himself as an angel of light. So it is no surprise if his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness. Their end will correspond to their deeds." Paul again in Romans, "I appeal to you, brothers, to watch out for those who cause divisions and create obstacles contrary to the doctrine that you've been taught. Avoid them, for such persons do not serve our Lord Christ, but their own appetites. By smooth talk and flattery, they deceive the hearts of the naive." All right. There's actually 100 of these verses. I know there's 100 because a Protestant website put together 100 of these verses. It's an issue, okay?
Yeah.
It's an issue that we were warned about repeatedly, and we read these verses at Mass, yet I don't hear it talked about, right? And let me make a distinction here. There's bad pastoring, and then there's a wolf in sheep's clothing, okay? A bad pastor will just say things that are wrong, you know?
Yeah, I feel like there's like maybe imprudent pastoring, there's matter of opinion interpretation, there could be just maybe your pastor's a little out of touch or something, you know?
Right. I think that, a lot of people don't like the pastoring of Pope Francis, our Pope, right? And you can say something in Catholicism that's completely true that sounds very Unitarian. You can also say something in Catholicism that's completely true that sounds like the opposite of Unitarian.
Yeah.
Right? Which one you choose to say is a pastoring decision. Right now in America, I don't think we should be saying a lot of Unitarian sounding stuff in America or Europe, because it's just not the climate or it's probably not the right pastoring move, Maybe for an individual it is, but not publicly, right? Pope Francis went to Southeast Asia, said something that sounded Unitarian. People get all upset about it. And it's like, I don't know what's going on in Southeast Asia. I don't know what that pastoring moment is. I also don't know that Pope Francis didn't completely fumble it. I just don't care that much about it. It's not the same thing as having a sexual predator.
Yeah.
You know, this is a very different issue, you know? And these three organizations had the worst type of wolf in sheep's clothing. And then the third, like, prior I want to just throw out there is there's almost like three different groups within the church, or three different types of church institutes, right? There's the church itself, its parishes, its dioceses. Maybe the Vatican's just the Diocese of Rome, but, you know, all those three things are like realities in the mystical body, right? And then there's like things like Simple House, which are kind of just 501c3s, or like it could be a big soup kitchen somewhere, right? And then the third type of thing in the church is like a religious order, okay? So if a wolf in sheep's clothing sneaks into a parish or a diocese or whatever, you're not shutting down the parish, right? There's a mystical reality in the parish that will forever exist despite sinners getting involved in it. And we all are sinners and we're all involved in it, you know? But it's a thing that, and it's something that we as Catholics, I think, in this moment in history have to remind ourselves. I think a lot of us are approaching our parishes and our dioceses and even the Rome with Protestant energy, right? The parish is a gift to you, and so is your diocese. And you need to figure that out. You should not be antagonistic to it.
Any one priest, you know.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if there's a wolf in sheep's clothing that gets into like the soup kitchen, you know, or the homeless shelter, or the charitable work organization.
Would be an example. Yeah.
That is an interesting example. There was a lot of spiritual leadership they were trying to do at L'Arche, so it's a little bit of a borderline example. L'Arche had a bad scandal with their founder. But, you know, okay, so the CEO of the soup line had a double life and was a big sinner, and we had to fire him, right?
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to shut down the soup line.
Right.
You know?
Right. I know that with L'Arche, they were like spent a lot of time examining the question, like, is our work, can it be separated from the founder, you know, because his legacy is so ugly, you know, can this be separated from the founder? It
is weird because L'Arche, I consider a blurry case because Simple House a little bit's a blurry case too. Like if we had, if the founders of Simple House, which would be Laura or Ari, you know, where wolves in sheep's clothing, it should be shut down, I think. You know, if L'Arche was funny because there was a lot of spirituality. The guy was pumping out books. They were all reading his books. There was definitely a sense of like, here is an avenue of spiritual growth through this work, right? And there is spiritual growth that also happens at the soup kitchen, but it's kind of secondary. Like the primary is just the feeding of the people at the soup kitchen. And then all the other stuff is kind of a secondary thing that happens. It's not directed, right? Or by design. So then the third thing is these religious orders. From the beginning, religious orders are merely one thing: schools of holiness. And if your school of holiness is founded by a wolf in sheep's clothing, it should be shut, completely shut. And it's not, and you are damaging people, and you'll probably continue to damage people if you don't shut it, right? And I've met people who've gotten close to Catholic cults or been in religious orders that had lost their way or whatever. They're wrecks.
I mean, I know quite a few, and like some of them like are atheists, or I mean, a number of them aren't Catholic. Some of them are atheists. Yeah.
The Legionnaires are the one I'm most familiar with personally, but they have a wide, I don't know what you call it, like a wake of wreckage, you know, behind them, you know, and it's just like, you know, a tree by its fruits. And it doesn't make sense that we keep these things going. It does make sense that we care about the people in them. It does make sense that we try to help the people in them, help them even form a new order maybe, but it doesn't make sense that we keep these things going. But what's weird about it is, even at Newman listed universities, they have guys in these orders as spiritual directors, as official student body spiritual directors. Even at like big Catholic youth conferences, they're inviting these people as spiritual leaders and speakers. And this is where
I
is
think
blown.
that's interesting to like, or maybe important to point out is like when you have like a guy, maybe this is obvious, but if someone founds the order, it's like they're founding it with their spiritual take, with their spiritual style, with their, like they're shaping the way that people are going to get to holiness, and they're making the rules for the order. They're making they're
setting
material,
a tone.
the formation material.
They're creating the environment.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's not just that. I'm sorry if this is so obvious, but like it's not just that they're gathering some people and okay, great, now we're all going to live at this house together. It's
I mean, it's like they did all that, and that's why it needs shut down.
Yeah.
Right. And what's weird is, like, let's take this would fit any of these three orders, any of these three groups we mentioned. There will be people who are directly abused, right? Some of them will leave and some of them won't. Okay. All those people are deeply harmed. There will be people who walk in the door, sniff that something doesn't smell right here, and leave. Those are the only sane people, frankly. You know what I mean? Like those people, okay, the people who stayed in, despite it not being right, lack spiritual discernment. And if they were in fact victims of the founder and stayed in and became priests, they literally need shut down. And I'm not blaming the victim. It's just like, you can't be in charge of pastoring other people if you consented to this type of pastoring and didn't leave. Like you've shown such poor judgment, you're done.
You can kind of have the right, I'm saying in quotations, like the orthodox ideas and the tone or the spirituality or whatever can use those right ideas to cause a lot of harm.
Oh, and I think undeniably. Right?
Well, and I think that's what makes it I wonder if I think that's a factor with these orders is like it's confusing because they have the right ideas.
Right. And all right, so part of like I went to my buddy who's a professor of theology and I'm like, my problem here is I don't even get why people don't get it. And so I've been trying to like puzzle that question. Like, why are we still letting these guys do spiritual direction, right? Like, why are we inviting them into good Catholic places and letting them operate, And it's not that I have anything against Father so-and-so. Yeah, it's just like, Father, like, what are we going to do? Like, he's going to recruit new members of his order here? I mean, we're endorsing the order by having them here and giving them spiritual direction. We're putting them on, I mean, I don't know, what are we doing, right? So I've been trying to, like, fathom why we do that, right? And my only theory is that too many people are seeing our faith as a philosophical like body of knowledge, right? Like you become Catholic, like you become an Epicurean or a Stoic, or you've just consented to this great philosophical, theological structure. And frankly, you do. And that's fine. And that's all true in and of itself, right? But if Catholicism is just that, it's not actually a spiritual religion yet.
Right.
If there is not the mystical, if there is not the relationship with Christ, if there is not the spiritual, that's what this spiritual direction is. It's not like they're teaching theology. They're spiritually directing, And I think that too, I remember 25 years ago, when it was rare to find people at any level that just believed in the catechism, right? Mm-hmm. And the Legionnaires were a group that believed in the catechism. And I walked into a Legionnaire retreat center, and I viewed them as a weird ally because I'm like, oh, well, at least they get it. At least they like believe in the catechism, But like I went to a Legionnaire retreat center 25 years ago and immediately just was hit with like, something's not right here. Something is weird. I remember talking to another guy and I used my hand and put it over my head like this, like I'm parting my hair. Mm-hmm. He was like, exactly. Because it was like they all parted their hair the same way. They all behaved the same way. It was like, it was cult behavior, But they did believe in the catechism. So what I found weird was, it was like we had a weird like ally or a strange bedfellows. Because we all needed to stick up for the catechism. They're sticking up for it. So they're my ally. But like, I don't feel like I'm the same religion as what's going on here. This is wrong, And that's real because like our religion is not just a set of ideas. Anyway, so that's my only theory, is that too many people are operating with Catholicism like it's just a philosophical set, and these groups all subscribe to the philosophy, all subscribe to the orthodoxy.
I think there's like an interesting thing. I remember some years ago when all the McCarrick stuff was breaking, kind of friend of mine who was maybe like church insider and I were kind of going back and forth with scandal stuff, and another friend who is very faithful, maybe wouldn't call herself a church insider and is a convert, was just like, everyone knows about all that stuff. And she was like so scandalized, and it was like, I felt chastised, and it was like great to feel chastised by this. But as an individual person, I can't necessarily address all those scandals, right? But it is strange. You pointed this out, that like these orders are still sort of sponsored by different institutions, schools and organizations, etc. Why?
Right. And back in the McCarrick problem, McCarrick was my bishop, and so was Bishop Finn out here in Kansas City. Bishop Finn represented a flavor of Catholicism, and so did McCarrick, and they were opposite flavors, right? Mm-hmm. You either liked one or disliked the other, or vice versa, right? And there were people who liked the flavor of Catholicism McCarrick represented who kind of went too far defending him and aiding and abetting, and there was also same with Finn. And even to this day, they'll be like, well, the Finn things are one. No, it wasn't. He hid an abuser. Like, he's done, over. There doesn't need to be any more understanding there, I mean, I love the guy. I personally met him, don't really have a problem with him personally, but you can't be a bishop if you hide an abuser, So, it's not personal. It's just like, no.
Right, right.
And same with all these, like, current members of these groups. It's not personal. I'm all for you. I'm rooting for you. I will celebrate if you surpass me in every single way, found a new order, and make it the greatest thing since the Franciscans,
Yeah.
But like, I'm not celebrating what you're doing right now. This is not right,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I have energy here because I'm not good at, I don't get why we are not fixing this.
Yeah. Well, and I think like, I don't get it either.
I think as lay people are like, what do you want me to do? Well, for one, I'd say don't ever send any of your kids to them as spiritual directors. Don't go to them as spiritual directors. Keep a wide berth, And it's not that I have a problem with that guy, but it's also like, what's even their like narrative? Like 150 years from now, are the Legionnaires still going to exist? And then like they'll have like everyone will not be from the founding, all new members. They'll be like, yeah, our founding sucked. Or will they create a lie about it?
Yeah.
Or like, whereas if you just took the Legionnaires, kicked everyone out of the order, and let them either join dioceses or form a new order, I'm okay with them forming a new order, and from scratch, not borrowing from the old order, new uniform, new name. I mean, if you like the idea of the military, analogy, Legionnaire, like you could be the Dragoons of Christ, the Marines of Christ, the Navy SEAL Team 6 of Christ, whatever. It's cool. Go for it. You haven't yet proven that's a bad idea to me. Let them do that. And then 150 years from now, when the new like Dragoon of Christ is coming, they're like, what about the Legionnaires? Yeah, that's not us. That sucked. We were founded by some of the guys who were refugees from that, who learned from that experience.
Right.
You can't really say that when you're still the same organization, So, I don't know. Any other defense we want to make for people doing this? I kind of am just at a loss.
Yeah, I
All right, if you've got a comment on this, the new comment line is 913-390-3672, or just send us an email like previous comments.
I think on this sensitive topic, if you want to, I don't know. Yeah, I guess if you don't mind being on the podcast, right, call in. But if not, right, just email or.
Well, we don't have to. You can still call in and just say, don't play the recording.
Yeah, just say, don't play the recording.
Play the recording.
If you don't want to play the recording, just
I
say
ask
it.
you to be brave.
Yeah.
Have you honestly been eating much molasses?
Somebody gave us a bottle of molasses, and I let it wallow in my pantry for years until I threw it out.
It's really great. It's like you only need a very trace amount. Like you just dip a spoon in it.
I didn't love it, yeah.
And then you drizzle it on something. And was it the one with the rabbit on it, or was it Grandma's? Those are the two major types.
Steens, maybe?
Well, some of these molasses are really rough. Like they're not sweet at all. So I sympathize with you if that's what you got.
I think it's like, I think it's a New Orleans thing. And they eat it with the...
Okay, I want some of this.
Okay, they eat it with the sausage.
Sold.
I'm sorry.
They eat molasses and sausage?
With the boudin. What is it called?
Boudin. Let's do it. Blood
right?
sausage. Yeah. Blood and rice sausage. Let's do it. We used to have the Louisiana Tech students. It's hard to get boudin because it is blood and rice sausage. You have to buy it on the side of the road. So the Louisiana Tech students would get a case of boudin and bring it up to Simple House for me so we could have it. It's delicious.
Yeah. I like blood sausage, but I like the boudin fine, but I didn't the molasses. Meh.
Yeah. I feel like I need to experiment more. I've just had the one that has like a briar rabbit on it and the one that's Grandma's. Those are the historic molasses for me, and I love both of them.
Okay.
So
all right.
Anyway, brought to you by Molasses.
Where's Big Blood Sausage, though? That's my question.
Where's Big Blood Sausage? I think there's different types of blood sausage.
No, I know. Our blood sausage in Puerto Rico is different from the Louisiana.
And there's also this thing in England they call black something or other, like black sausage. It's where they fry blood in grease and throw it on. Black pudding.
Yeah, black pudding, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not that bad, even though it's totally gross how they make it.
Well, in Puerto Rico, it's called morcilla, and they put rice in it inside the sausage, and that's nice. It's nice.
There you go. All right. Thank you for listening to Simpleton Podcast. Sorry that we had such a downer part on the last episode, but that is what we're here for, partly.
We welcome comments and feedback.
Okay. Check out Daniel Mitsui's art. All right. Peace with you, Laura. Talk to you later.
All right. See you later, Clark. Goodbye.
Bye.